Everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian, and thank you all for logging on. I am joined tonight by Tim Musso.
Welcome, folks.
Who you all already know, I am sure, and we've got a really exciting show tonight filled with lots of really cool, awesome watches.
I got to admit, I was reading this article about the Blue Oyster Cult with a new album, so what are we doing here? No, I'm just kidding, you guys. All right, we're good to go. Friends joining in from far flung, thanks as ever for your time. We've got an incredible array of watches on the table tonight. We've got a bit of high horology, mainstream luxury horology, simple watches, complicated watches, sports watches, and my personal theme for the evening, weird watches. All right, Brian, wrist check tonight?
I am actually not wearing a watch right now, so that is
It's a prototype.
That's a bummer.
The new Patek Philippe Advanced Research Invisible. You guys don't get it yet. Not yet. It's not ready for public consumption. You guys know me, Zin Easy M11, 500 pieces, lefty chrono. It's a tribute to a great 90s piece made for the German Federal Customs Service Enforcement Unit. And a wonderful way to wear a 43 that doesn't monopolize your wrist. Okay.
So why don't we get started? This is, this is a watch that was a viewer of the show emailed looking to see this watch live in person. So I felt happy to oblige since it's the first time that I've actually been taken up on the offer that we ask at the end of each show that we're going to bring something on. So I was very excited. Here we have a
we're reading those emails.
We are reading the emails. So here we have a 126600 Sea Dweller. This is the 43 millimeter Sea Dweller. You've got the red Sea Dweller there. It's the most current version of the watch. And I would say that this, along with the Deep Sea, which is also on the table right here, this is the James Cameron, which Tim can show you in one moment, are the largest sports watches that Rolex is currently making, along with the Yachtmaster 2. So if you're looking for a larger size watch and the Submariner just doesn't do it, these two watches, along with the Yachtmaster 2, are probably going to be your three choices.
I would also say it's interesting to take a quick look at the Neo Red, because in a lot of ways this watch is controversial. Okay, first things first, this came out of Basel 2017. It was officially the 50th anniversary Sea Dweller, harken back to the original model. Now, the interesting thing about it is that it brought back the red Sea Dweller script on the dial for the first time since the original model. But it was controversial for a few reasons. First, the 43 millimeter size, some folks said it was indistinct from the Deep Sea. I'm going to show you in a minute why that's not a concern. More controversial was the Cyclops eye for the first time on a Sea Dweller model. So a lot of folks find this to be a little bit controversial. I find it to be practical, but again, Rolex was not afraid to stir the pot. Now, another feature I can show you about this watch that is not terribly evident on camera, but I do think it merits a quick mention. Now here you can see it. The dial itself is a matte black rather than a gloss black, as you'll find on every other modern black dial Rolex, save perhaps the Milgauss. This is a very different look for a Rolex dial, and it also helps to compound the vintage references of this new red Sea Dweller. Now, if you look at the watch in profile, this is why I'm going to say it is a bit of a red herring to argue that this watch is indistinct from the Deep Sea. It's true, they're only 1 millimeter apart in terms of diameter, but look at the difference in thickness. It's like a Datejust versus a Submariner. Hell, I would even say that a Sub and a Datejust are closer in thickness than these two. The Deep Sea is a very hardcore watch, and for many reasons, it remains the most massive Rolex available. Don't be deceived by case size. Now, I want to show you a quick difference when you come to the clasps, because the clasps of the two are distinct. The red Sea Dweller is impressively spec'd, as you can see. It features a fold-out extension, and it also features an incremental adjustment system. So you've got those 20 millimeters of incremental adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, and you've got the fold-out clasp. But the Deep Sea goes one better. That's an upgrade from the Submariner. The Deep Sea, though, is still the best bracelet Rolex makes, and the best clasp by far. So the first thing you see is that at face value, nothing looks particularly special here until you realize that there's a trapdoor built into the clasp. Now this allows you to extend the clasp. You've got a glide lock style system, but here you've got one that you can use while it's on the wrist, as opposed to the Sub and the Sea Dweller 43, where you actually have to remove the watch from the wrist. You don't have to risk dropping your watch in a marine environment. You've also got the pull-out extension. So now you've got what us colonial types would call 2 inches of full extension, and everyone everywhere else would call 50 millimeters. It is a remarkably deluxe and impressive system in person, and that's why I say the Deep Sea really is in a class by itself as a watch and as a piece of professional diving equipment. You can even see that gas release valve script underneath because there's a solid cylinder that sits beneath the crystal about 5 millimeters thick, and the titanium caseback, the crystal sits on that cylinder and they compress each other and create a hermetic seal at depth. That's why you see the ring lock system at 6 o'clock. It is its own fabrication. No other Rolex watch is built like this one.
Why don't we do a quick shot on the wrist so that people can see the difference in the thickness? Because from my experience, the Deep Sea has always been a little bit too large for my wrist, but this Sea Dweller fits quite well. So I think that it's a good way of showing that even though the 1 millimeter difference of there on the case size will fit very different than the overall width.
Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I could wear this watch. I'm not sure it makes a statement that I particularly endorse. It's awfully bold, and well, I'm not that bold a guy. I will say this, though. It's wearable. Now, there is a different Deep Sea, and there is a new Deep Sea as of 2018 with different measurements. It's more wearable. It's better matched lug to bracelet with. It's called the 126660. That's one you have to consider if you're looking at a Deep Sea. There is a new Deep Sea with a 3-day power reserve and redesigned case, lugs, and bracelet. So now let's throw the Sea Dweller 2043. We should see a Sea Dweller 23.
Would be nice. Good watch for
It would be like a cylinder on the wrist. It would be taller than it is wide. Let's throw the 50th anniversary Sea Dweller on the wrist now. You can see this wears more like a Submariner. This is an easy watch to wear because it's thin and the deep sea is thick. You can really see, especially from this angle, that the watch is far more accommodating for a small wrist. And whereas I can pull off the Deep Sea, but I think it's just a little bit ungainly on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, here I actually feel like this watch is a good match. If you want a big visible Rolex diver, this is a good choice.
Okay. Starting with a bang. What would you like to move on to?
I would like to move on to a watch that I happen to adore because it's one of the greatest watches of the 2000s and one of the strangest watches of all time.
Okay, let's talk about it then.
This is the...
And in the meantime, guys, please, if you have any questions about watches in general, the reason this is a live show is because Tim and myself will be answering questions on the show. So keep them coming in the chat and we will be sure to take a look.
Also, remember, link in the description, win that Omega Railmaster. Okay. Now we're talking about a watch from 2006. This was the UN 160, 160 years of Ulysse Nardin. This was the oval watch of its generation. Just about every generation has had its oval watch, from the Omega Dynamic in the 60s and 70s to the Audemars Piguet Millenary in the 90s and 2000s. In 2006, this watch, made in white gold in 500 pieces, and you can see the engraved rose gold number plaque on the flank, was a celebration of Ulysse Nardin history and mechanical accomplishment because it contains the UN 160 caliber. Now let me try to show you to the best of my ability because the parts we're looking at are very small and we need to get very close. But if you look very closely, just below my finger, you can see the skeletonized escape wheel that's part of the double direct impulse Ulysse Nardin escapement as originally created for the Freak. This is the dual Ulysse escapement. Now you can see it. Now I'm getting that iridescent blue light. But that is a double direct impulse, unlubricated silicon escapement. The dual Ulysse escapement, originally created for the Freak in Ulysse Nardin's first ever manufacture automatic caliber. 50-hour power reserve. It's a COSC chronometer. It has a full balance bridge and a free sprung index, and that incredible silicon escapement that you can actually see a little bit better now than you could before. The watch also has a remarkable dihedral crystal. If you've seen the Audemars Piguet code 1159 and you've wondered where they got that idea of the crystal that swells from the center out and actually rises at the edge, this is where they got that. You can also see that the case back is actually arced to follow the arc of the wrist, and this example on the white gold option bracelet was the rarest of the rare. Although there was also a rose gold version in 160 pieces, very few of these 500 were crafted with the white gold bracelet, which actually raised the price to $55,100. You'll also note that they used blue Côte de Genève on the dial side, the Arabic numerals, the nameplate chronometer, the signature of the 160 years, the sub-register for seconds, all of them are in white gold. And if you look very closely, you can actually see that the luminescent indices of the watch are actually affixed to the interior face of the bezel. Everything about this watch is special, right down to its quick-set mechanism. Yes, its quick-set mechanism, which is bidirectionally settable. I love this watch in every way. We haven't had this watch for 5 years, and I sincerely hope it's not another 5 until this arrives. You'll also note that the Ulysse Nardin nameplate in white gold is freehand engraved. This is a very special watch. I'm going to throw it on the wrist now. What do you think of this?
So I would say that it's almost so bad it's good.
I told you it was going to be a weird watch.
No, I mean, I think that oval watches have been tried from many different brands. I think that it's definitely an aesthetic that's an acquired taste. Overall, you can see the amount of care that went into the watch itself from everything that you described. I like that it's a white metal. I think that it makes it a lot more wearable. I think that there's a richness to the gold, and the blue is striking.
I have to say, I love this watch. It's an acquired taste. It's a taste I have. You're talking to a guy who loves sardines, anchovies, liverwurst, cheese in a can. I have a taste for all of these strange things. And I love oval watches. You can see, true to its original design intent, it doesn't interfere with the wrist bone, so it's super easy for me to plant it flat and show you it in proportion on the wrist. It's also really slim. It's only 11 millimeters thick. It is a lovely and incredibly crafted chronometer. It's a tribute to Ulysse Nardin's marine heritage, as well as its modern watchmaking savoir-faire and innovation.
Let me
Truly
try this
special.
bad boy on. Because
Yeah,
as you know, I like quirky watches, and I'm a sucker for a big date window like this.
Let me make sure that crown's on there good. You're going to be impressed by how massive that is.
Oh, wow. This thing is solid.
It's like a platinum watch, and the bracelet is built like a tank or a battleship anchor.
I also think from a movement perspective, or let's call it a complication perspective, the big date window, especially with having a bidirectional ability to change through the crown, often goes unnoticed as sort of just having a standard date, but it's really its own complication.
And easier to read. Look, it works. The theory works. I'll also say this: the movement is
It's not
incredible.
quite as oval as the millenary. To me, it's a lot more.
It's also curved on the backside, which the millenary is not. It's definitely the quirkiest oval watch you can buy. Among quirky watches, this is the quirkiest. It's Q squared, or maybe cubed. All right, jumping into the box right here. We've got folks saying that I tend to like the things that you find in MREs. That's another thing I like. Those are great, by the way. Highly underrated. And then we've got a bunch of questions right here. From Turkischer Meister, though, a wonderful comment. Tim, you're a watch gourmet. You don't want to see my actual food. It's probably both too weird and too boring for this chat. But on the other hand, I am a connoisseur of bourbon. On that topic, we can have an extended discussion. And speaking of the finer things in life, let's talk about perhaps the best 1921 ever made by Vacheron.
So here we have, and I brought up 1921 on the last show in yellow gold, which was a limited edition piece of 64 pieces, which we talked about how it was very rare for Vacheron to make a limited edition that low, especially one of their best-selling pieces. Well, we've decided to trump it today. Here we have a 1921 in rose gold, limited to 15 pieces for the world. This was produced for Monticello race.
Yep.
Race.
Basically, it's a racetrack.
In New York. So here you have a matte black dial. You've got red accents there on the sub-second hand. We were trying to determine exactly what color we would call the Arabic numerals. We decided that it was more of a peach color rather than a photina. But the watch itself is absolutely striking. It's here on a gray strap with red stitching. And I must say that to me, it has to be one of the best variations of the 1921.
I'm also going to say this, regardless of what you call those numerals, whether you call them peach, pumpkin, or creamsicle, that is a killer color combo with the red gold, that creamsicle font, and then you've got the red accents, you've got the matte. It's not really a black, it's more of an anthracite dial, and it is very dramatic in Monticello Motor Club red and black colors. You have a matching strap, which is an exquisite choice of contrasting stitch, and Check it out, double alligator on both sides. Now, the watch itself is dedicated to Monticello Motorsports Park in Suffolk, New York. This came out in 2016, 15 pieces for the 10th anniversary of the track. They've actually got 4.1 miles of track, and basically, you become a member or you rent track time, and you can take your car out. They've got off-road tracks, they've got short loops. It's really like an amusement park for adults, but if you've got the membership, you've probably already got the car. What you might not have is the watch, and we've got the hookup for that right here. 40 millimeters, but let me tell you, it wears larger. Let me show you this on the wrist. Very flat. This is another non-round watch. That's becoming a theme tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think that as far as Vacheron Constantin goes, the historic line for them has been doing extraordinarily well for many years now, and this has to be the most notorious one that they've come out with.
Yeah, this is the one I would want. You ask me which one do I want this one. I'll also show you that although they all have the caliber 4400 inside, it does bear mentioning that this is part of the fun. A Geneva hallmark manual wind movement with a 65-hour power reserve. That's a good time. Beautiful Cote de Genève laid down by abrasive wheel, not stamped. You can see black polished screw heads with chamfered slots, micro perlage below the balance on the base plate, every single edge, and you can see it to good effect from this angle, is gleaming with a mirrored rounded hand chamfer. And then you can see a few well-chosen grain surfaces, including the wheels of the train. And how much do you love that traditional pocket watch style center wheel? Every dished jewel sink and screw sink is also beveled, and you can see that lovely graining across the looks like the crown wheel adjacent to my finger right there. A lovely watch on both sides. And note, this is the post-2012 Geneva hallmark standard, so it applies to the case and dial as well.
Awesome. Okay.
Fun stuff.
So, do we want to go with the AP or the Journe?
Let's go with the Journe. Let's
Okay.
go with the smaller brand.
So here we have a original Octosport in aluminum. So as far as watches that I would say that I've had my own eye on for a long period of time, this would have to be the watch. So the watch came both on an aluminum bracelet and the rubber strap. I have a personal affinity towards the watch on an aluminum bracelet just because it's nothing like I've ever seen from another brand. Aluminum case, as I said, aluminum bracelet. What's so special about this watch is that it is also an aluminum movement. So Journe, the Octosports today, if I'm correct, Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are still produced with the aluminum movement.
That's correct.
But they have a titanium coating.
Now
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct. The important thing is that the aluminum was discontinued not because of manufacturing defects. This is something that's commonly cited. It's not true. The aluminum destroyed tools, and it was difficult and expensive to produce at the desired volumes at the desired cost. So there's nothing about these watches other than their rarity that sets them apart from the titanium. They were just that much harder to make. The constant between them has been the aluminum calibers. Now, while FP Journe movements are typically 18 karat rose gold, these are aluminum. And while the titanium watch with the aluminum movement is quite light on the wrist, the aluminum watch with the aluminum case and the aluminum bracelet is otherworldly. I mean, this is almost unnervingly light. This is, oh my God, is it still on my wrist? Did I lose it light? It's incredible. It's the opposite of the full white gold bracelet UN we just discussed. This is the one that's so gossamer evanescent and fleeting. You could quite literally forget it's there.
I mean, this watch is just effing amazing. I mean, if you are looking for a sport watch now and, you want to do something that's, call it, at this point still off the beaten path, like this to me is the watch to have, and I think that this to me is still such an incredible value for what it is.
2012, 2013, 2014, that was it. And that's in the scope of a brand that only produces 700-800 watches a year in any given year, sometimes less. So if you think about this watch being a small subset of that production and then only 3 model years, you realize the scarcity of these. I'm also going to speak up in defense of a feature I kind of like. I've always enjoyed the rubber bumpers. If you're like me and you don't like scratching or scuffing your watch, I thought these were practical. FP Journe's a practical guy. Sure, he's into aesthetics, and some of his engineering is downright Baroque, but there's also a simple desire to keep your watch as factory as possible, especially when the whole thing features a lovely matte finish like this does. This is actually a blasted style finish. It's not a brushed satin, and as you can see, if treated well, the rubber does hold up well. It also adds a much needed second tone to the otherwise rather pale silver dial. case, and bracelet. You can see that the watch gains a little bit of strength from the dial. The bezel, though, in silver, the case in silver, the bracelet in silver. I feel like it needs that secondary color complement, and this does that well. Plus, it's got a bumper where you most need one, underneath the clasp where you're going to go desk diving.
Let me see this thing.
Check it out. It's a good one.
Oh, it is so nice. I mean, let's see if we can zoom in here. And it actually feels like there's nothing on the wrist.
I want to say...
Like, I think I've had rubber bands on that way more than this.
It's like 50, 60 grams at the most.
Yeah.
At the most. Take out some links to size it up, it's even less. Okay, we got someone saying enough with the Journe. And then we got another guy with the opposite perspective, Smoko, saying this FPGA gives me faith that great new watch designs are still possible. And right here, Brick Lane saying AP time. Okay, I'm back to that.
Let's do it. So here we have a rare beast. We have a 15305 ST. This is the 39mm stainless steel skeleton that AP came out with. They also came out with a counterpart in rose gold that was on a brown strap. The big brother to this watch is the, let's call it, very popular double balance that AP is still producing now.
I would even say the somewhat more common double balance. I feel like I see more of those than these.
I definitely see more of those than these, and they've probably produced more of those than these. This particular watch, I don't know what the production number was. It wasn't a limited edition.
It wasn't, but it was generally boutiques and premier retailers. It was also the kind of watch that was rarely stocked, so a lot of times this was an order-only watch. And I have a feeling, because about 2 years passed between the first showing and delivery, that there was a waiting list for this watch, and I doubt any of them ever just sat in dealers awaiting an owner. You can also see that it is fully skeletonized and hand-finished on both sides. And this is important because the base movement in here is the AP, a 3120, and the 3120, as you'll see in a 15300 or a 15400, is partly manually finished, but it's also designed to be mass-produced. It has a lot of mechanical finish. So to be able to get that rock-solid architecture with actual hand finishing, this isn't rote electro-spark erosion here. This is done the old-fashioned way. This is high rejection rate hand skeletonization and a lovely hand chamfer at the edge of every skeletonized bridge and plate. It is a wonderful watch that remains useful as a watch. You turn this watch over and you realize it's quite easy to read the time. The hands don't vanish. The scale isn't so understated that you can't distinguish it, and it's a timepiece that still has all of the underlying durability of the 15300, from the shock resistance of the full balance bridge and the free sprung balance to the 50-meter water resistance. So this is one that I can, in good conscience, tell you is an everyday craft art watch.
And I just think the 39 fits that much better than the 41.
It does. I would not own the 41. It's just too much for me. This, on the other hand, this is just about perfect. It does wear larger than a 39. Don't get me wrong. Think 41, 42 round watch and you get the basic idea. But it does fit quite well, and I've got no problem. 16 centimeters, not an issue. 14.5 centimeters circumference on the bracelet. I'd say that's the smallest wrist that can accommodate this particular watch. And you can see as the light catches all those facets, it's just explosive. It puts a sunburst dial to shame. Good piece.
Yeah. Let me see this bad boy while you pick up another one.
Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about motorsports-inspired watches. We had one that's rather dear in the Vacheron Constantin, and that one, of course, inspired by Monticello Motorsports Club in upstate New York, up in Suffolk. And it's important to note that you don't have to spend a fortune to get a credible motorsports-inspired watch from a brand that's known for them. This is the Chopard Mille Miglia chronograph, and this was a 2007 limited edition of 1,000 pieces. Each example in this 5-watch series was released in one of the classical national racing colors, and this is actually French racing blue, and it's my favorite of the series. It is a lush blue lacquered dial that is fully loomed, hands and Arabic numerals, with lovely snailed silver subregisters sunken into the dial, and you can see that there's a lacquered tachymeter engraved into the bezel. The Mille Miglia logo, and I should mention the Mille Miglia was an open road race held between 1927 and 1957. Since 1977, it's been a vintage car rally, with the eligible cars being those from the era that would have contested the original in anger. Now, the thing I like about it is that this is a 40mm titanium watch that is easy to wear with a lovely muted satin finish that contrasts beautifully with the lacquer blue of the dial. Throw it on the wrist and you can see that this watch has a little bit of a nod to history with the simulated perforated plated Corfam, the synthetic that was featured on 1970s motorsports watches, but here it's actually a perforated leather with a lovely French racing blue contrasting stitch. Now the watch is automatic and a COSC Swiss chronometer, featuring a very high-grade variant of the ETA 28942. So this is a watch that features all the toys with mainstream tractor movement, reliability, and accuracy, with small brand chic, as well as a cool backstory, because if you're into cars, you already know about the Mille Miglia, and this is a wonderful totem of that great event.
Yeah, so the reason why I brought this watch on the show, number one, is everything that you just said. But number two, I'm always looking for cool, quirky sports watches that, have a really, whether it's a striking dial or just a good combination of the dial and case. And so here you have a titanium case. The watch is overall very light. You've got the beautiful blue, as you mentioned. The only change that I would probably make on this watch is I would probably put it on the black tire tread strap just to make it a little bit more sporty and timely for summer. But again, the racing strap is absolutely awesome. And these are watches that you can get where you're not breaking the bank on a watch. And it's unique, it's interesting, and there's a lot of story behind the piece itself. And again, it's a watch that somebody will see on your wrist, and there's a story behind it. And it's not something that you're going to see probably on anybody else's wrist.
It's also a lot of fun if you're going to a Cars and Coffee meetup. I mean, let's face it, you can't always buy a new car to bring to the parking lot. But every once in a while, you can bring out a new watch that's got a cool story, a car story associated with it. Plus, we all know that car watch co-branding usually doesn't work out well. Sometimes sponsoring an event is a better deal than having an automotive branding co-sponsor on the dial of the watch.
Yeah, no, and I like that there was really nothing other than the writing on the case back, sort of to signal that this watch was a sort of limited edition, that there wasn't like a logo on the front or anything like that. It's just, outwardly facing, really unique, interesting. You've got bright luminescent numbers. It's just a very well done executed watch.
I have an unofficial Audemars Piguet on the table tonight, and this is pretty much going to peg the meter for weird. I promised you weird watches after my own heart. I gave you the beginning of that with the Ulysse Nardin. Then we pulled out that wonderful French racing blue dial. We've got an aluminum FP Journe, and now we've got the HYT H2 Aviator. Now, you guys who watch the Tuesday show and also the reviews channel know that I'm a big fan of HYT, and I've actually been giving them free exposure on the channel because I love them as a brand, I love their products, and I want them to succeed. Well, we did the H0 previously, and now we're talking about the H2 Aviator, 50 pieces, black titanium. What's cool about this watch is that it's a regulator and a retrograde. You get a minute hand at the center that actually traces a sapphire track suspended above the center of the movement, and the movement and the dial are one and the same. And then you have this green fluid. There are actually two reservoirs in the form of pistons that are driven by cams, propelled by the mechanical movement, and the meniscus between the clear liquid and the green liquid, if we can get really close there, that meniscus indicates the hour against a radial scale of Arabic numerals. Now the cool thing is, I'm going to show you how the watch actually tells the time in 12-hour sweeps, jumping back to the beginning in retrograde fashion. By the way, see the jump of the minute hand from 30 to 30 minutes? That's how the minute hand operates. You can see that the track, the meniscus, is getting closer and closer to 6, and when it reaches 60, you could see how quickly it jumps back. Those are two fluids. One is clear, one is green. They're immiscible. They will never mix. The movement itself is built by Audemars Piguet Renault et Papis, so the folks who make the high-end Richard Mille watches, as well as the Audemars Piguet Royal Oaks. You can see the depth is second to none, and the finishing exquisite. This is APRP standard. You can also see that there is a temperature gauge up at 930, and there is a crown function indicator over at roughly 245. That's neutral, that's winding, that's setting. And you could see I have that crown function indicator. I also have twin mainspring barrels, a free sprung balance on a full balance bridge, highly shock resistant with a handmade overcoil hairspring. Twin mainspring barrels endowing this watch with an 8-day power reserve, and you can see the sapphire caseback over traditional watchmaking. This is a watch that combines a strange sort of modern clepsydra vibe with watchmaking, mechanical watchmaking of the absolute highest order. It's a big old thing, I'm not going to lie. HYT watches are on the bold side of proportioning. I'll also say this, they make a version of this watch without lugs called the H20 that is my favorite watch they make. 48.8 millimeters, so this is no shrinking lily, this is not a bashful boy right here, but I will tell you, what a way to have fun. The thing even comes on an Aramid style Kevlar strap. Absolutely awesome stuff.
When they first came out with these liquid watches, I think that like it really did take the entire show by storm, just because nobody had really ever seen anything like it, and it's rare for a completely new technology to come along. I remember the first show where I forget the name of the brand, but it was a digital watch where you could scroll through and do different things on it.
Was it Slide by any chance?
It may have been Slide.
Terry Nataf's later life project.
But, and obviously, again, that completely transitioned out. But these guys are still doing a great job. And what's crazy to me is that if this watch said RM on it, it would be $1 million watch, and it would have sold out everywhere.
Yeah, if you get the APRP powered RM, it is $1 million watch.
Yeah.
That's $140,000. I see we got some folks asking. The HYT H20 is about 150 and 120, and I want that watch so badly. Look, the guy who originally had this idea was a nuclear engineer. It took a decade to make it work, and they've got their own little mini subsidiary called Pressiflex that actually makes all the fluidic components of these watches. We've had retrogrades. We've had jump
You can't even
hours.
describe how cool it is on the inside.
It's like a movement that's this deep. You can look down into it like the engine bay of a Supermarine Spitfire. It has that kind of depth and mechanical fascination. I don't want to call it a watch. I want to call it like a toy for big boys, because that's really what it is. I'll also say this. We're going to have more HYT on the program, so to be continued, ... That's my verbal ellipsis.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of the show. I've got one more watch here on the table. I can't believe I just realized that I brought two skeletons. Here we have a Roger Dubuis 42 millimeter automatic skeleton, another brand that is, I'd say, very well known for their skeleton pieces.
Yes.
And I was trying to describe, how would you describe Roger Dubuis to somebody that doesn't really know that much about watches, like as a brand?
I would say it's basically, these days, I would say it is the younger, hipper brother of Patek Philippe, or the more refined, more manufactured Genevois Richard Mille. I would say they're legitimately trying to be the Geneva Seal Richard Mille competitor. And they make all their own stuff, from their hairsprings to their balances to their escapements. So unlike RM, they're doing it all in-house, which is impressive because it took them 5 years to tool up to do all that.
Yeah, so the way that I described it actually was like an amalgamation of those two brands. So very interesting, obviously not as well known, call it, if you're outside of the watch community, but they make beautiful pieces, high-tech watchmaking, lots of legacy there. And this, for me, happens to be, of their current collection, one of my favorite pieces.
Okay. So this is the Excalibur 42, guys. The thing about Roger Dubuis is that it does an exceptional percentage of its production as skeleton watches and as tourbillon watches. Now, this is the former. You can see it's a micro rotor automatic with a 60-hour power reserve. This is the RD820 SQ. If you look very closely, adjacent to the crown, can we get super close here? I'll hold it steady. But there is a Geneva hallmark on this movement, and this watch is Geneva Seal standard. This exceptional star-shaped bridge is hand skeletonized, entirely engine turned. You can see that perlage with mirrored chamfer on its edge. Every screw is black polished. You can see the cover for the regulator also black polished. Turn it over, you get a better sense of the mechanism from its underside. Let me remove some of these fingerprints. But the watch is finished to the highest standards of Geneva watchmaking, but it's not designed to be another Vacheron, Laurent Ferrier, or Patek Philippe, because frankly, the world has enough of those. We don't need Me Too watches. We need watches that are willing to take some risks, and this one certainly does that. The fact that it is hand-finished the same way a Patek would be, to the same standard a Patek would be, while expressing a completely different aesthetical sensibility, right down to the star form cap on its open mainspring barrel and the fully visible train. You could see from the balance through the train right to the mainspring. This is a watch that does things differently, and if I may, it's almost like looking at the scaffolding of a skyscraper under construction. It's basically taking the machine or the engineering and bringing it from the inside out, and that's what you get with Roger Dubuis. You get the machine brought from the inside to the outside.
My only point that I would make on this watch is I do wish they had brought some sort of luminescence into the piece, because I do think it's still on the sporty side regardless of the strap. And, it's called casual sport. But I wish that there was luminescence on the hands and perhaps going around the circumference of the bezel there, just to make it a little bit easier to read at night.
There are two schools of thought. One is that a watch should be watched and easy to read. The other is that oftentimes when you've got a skeleton, you need to minimize the hands. So I appreciate, and we've got two interesting schools of thought on the table at the same time. It's not an easy call to make. Do you minimize the hands to the point that they don't block the hand-finished works, or do you make the watch more functional? And I think Roger Dubuis, their sole concession to legibility was creating a half-frosted flank on the hands. You could see how the hands are half-frosted, whereas Audemars Piguet actually included loom strips in its hands. So very different schools of thought, and I think ultimately the Audemars Piguet is the one I would rather wear, just because frankly I like to be able to read my watch, and I like to be able to read it at night too. So I agree with Brian, but Roger Dubuis' take is certainly a valid one.
Awesome. Okay, is that everything that we've done?
I think we ran the table.
I think
for
we ran
once.
the table. That was fast.
Yeah. Okay. Quick questions, guys. Throw them out there. And bump. We got John Dandola saying, Tim, you've covered a handful of timepieces that are so hard to read they fail in their main task. You clearly haven't seen the Hublot All Black series. Or if you want the high horology version of that, look up Beat Haldeman. Just look up the watches of Beat Haldeman, and you will find a watch that has a completely obscured dial under a black sapphire. You cannot see it, and that's the point.
Okay. Is that all that we have?
Yeah, we got a watch to give away, guys. Link in the description. Win that Omega Seamaster Railmaster. And remember, I will be announcing it towards the end of the month. On the, I believe the 22nd will be the day I call the winner. So you've got most of the remainder of the month, but not all of the month. Don't leave this one until the 31st.
Exactly. Please sign up. And as always, if there are any questions or anything that you want answered on the show, don't hesitate to email myself or Tim in advance. We're also happy to bring on any of the watches that we have onto the show to discuss further and for you guys to see here on video while we talk about them.
We got a question from JBO Surf of Adelaide, Australia. Question, Tim, what is the best affordable annual calendar? Well, I think Longines now has a Longines Master annual calendar, and I think you can get it with a blue dial. That would probably be the beginning of my suggestions. Also remember...
Does Mercier do an annual calendar right now, or is it a complete calendar?
It's a complete calendar, but I believe they've previously had an annual calendar. I'll also say this. You want to check the Ulysse Nardin Marine Chronograph annual calendar. It was made in the middle of the last decade. You can reliably pick those up for under $5,000, sometimes under $4,000. That is a substantial watch, and if you recognize that annual calendar chronograph complication from the Richard Mille RM11, well, there's a reason for that. It's the same DD module, so I would recommend that one.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, and Maurice Lacroix also makes an annual calendar. Well, they made an annual calendar chronograph in the Masterpiece collection over a decade ago. That's another one with the same module. I highly recommend it.
Beautiful. Well, that's all that we have for tonight. So please join us back next Wednesday for the Watch Insider. My name is Brian.
I'm Tim.
And thank you guys for logging on.